South Africa very nearly descended into a civil war in the 1980s. Although the period covered by the Truth Commission stretched from 1960 to 1994, the overwhelming number of human rights violations reported to the Commission occurred between 1985 and 1993. Part of the explanation was the increase in the intensity of the resistance to apartheid in the early 1980s, which was met with greater repression. After the uprisings of 1976 were squashed, a new opposition grew on grassroots level. The National Party's introduction of a tricameral parliament with separate houses for whites, coloureds and Indians in 1983, with no provision for black political rights, was met with the launch of the United Democratic Front. The United Democratic Front engaged in labour strikes, mass rallies and marches, and consumer and other boycotts. Another part of the explanation for the increase in human rights abuses was the belief of the National Party government during the 1980s that they faced a total onslaught on the state and the economy from internal and external enemies, all of them inspired by international communism, they said. They therefore formulated a total strategy to counter this, a strategy which allowed security forces to operate outside the laws of the country. The torture, kidnapping and killing of government opponents thus became almost commonplace.
There is an attempt under Marxist leadership to bring about the revolution in Southern Africa, more specifically in the Republic of South Africa. This can no longer be denied. The revolutionary elements are there and nothing can satisfy the hunger of those powers. They want nothing but the overthrow of the present order. They want nothing but the overthrow of the civilization in this country.
The revolutionary strategies adopted by the government's opponents blurred traditional distinctions between combatants and non-combatants, between legitimate and illegitimate targets, and between acceptable and unacceptable methods. The normal processes of law and even the government's tough security measures seemed incapable of dealing with this situation. Members of the security forces watched with increasing frustration while revolutionary movements organized, mobilized, and intimidated or killed their opponents seemingly at will. The security forces were expected to play by the rules, while their opponents could and did use any methods that they liked. Consequently, the then government began to make use of unconventional strategies, which of necessity had to be planned and implemented on a need-to-know basis.
In Parliament, it was stressed that the only counter-strategy against a total onslaught with any hope of success is also a total strategy. Total resistance must be offered. Fragmentary and ad hoc efforts in any sphere would be futile and pointless. The onslaught must be resisted on a national basis in all spheres, by all national groups and inhabitants of the South African subcontinent.
The security police was the government's chief weapon to harass, disrupt and destroy anti-apartheid activists. The small security police team under the leadership of Brigadier Jack Cronje, based in Pretoria, was responsible for a large number of killings.
There were circumstances under which activists had to be eliminated by killing them. It's the only way in this war situation in which activists could be effectively acted against. Merely arresting them in terms of security legislation was insufficient, as it was of a limited and brief duration. To charge such a person and take them through the formal legal structures and procedures was cumbersome and insufficient and impossible. There was no other choice than to take normal war action and to eliminate activists. This was considered necessary under these circumstances. Reports with regard to the death of activists was passed on to head office, and there were never any repudiation or instructions to stop these eliminations.
But there was also a specialist police unit specializing in terrorizing and killing government opponents. They were based at a farm outside Pretoria called Vlakplaas and used former guerrillas who switched sides, called Askaris.
It was ANC cadres that infiltrated the country on operations that were caught by the police, by the security police. Then they had the difficult option out of facing court cases and long interrogation, third degree methods used, electrical shocks, smothering with a wet bag over the head, or decide to work for the security police with benefits like a proper pay and a luxury life on Vlakplaas. So it's obvious, it's human that you would choose the easy way out.
We just turned into political serial killers. We had no respect for human life. And our commanders had absolutely no respect for our lives.
We were above the law. I mean, we were untouchable. We had the backing of the upper echelons in the police and the politicians, so we were above the law.
I was at no stage aware of any unit carrying out assassinations. The Vlakplaas unit, as it was explained to me, had a totally different objective, a totally different field of activity. I was never part, as I've said, of any decision to assassinate or murder anybody. I totally distance myself from assassination. Even in the fight which we had, assassination is wrong, and I would never have supported it. And if I had any inclination, any indication that there were actually people committing assassinations and that there was a unit which was used for that, I would have acted violently myself.
The government found an ally in their war against the ANC and the UDF, the Inkatha Freedom Party of Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. The police helped and often instigated Inkatha militants to kill UDF opponents, and the Defence Force trained a crack IFP attack force. Although the Truth Commission unearthed very few secrets of the old Defence Force, it was revealed that it had its own secret death squad called the Civil Cooperation Bureau, or CCB. They were responsible for the assassinations of, among others, peace activist David Webster and Namibian struggle leader Anton Lubowski. For almost 10 years, these secret police and military units waged a campaign of terror against anti-apartheid activists. Assassinations and the use of letter bombs and car bombs became commonplace. In April 1989, Wits anthropologist and human rights activist Dr. David Webster wrote a report on repression in South Africa. It contained details of disappearances and assassinations. He called it apartheid's ultimate weapon. On Workers' Day 1989, Webster fell victim to apartheid's ultimate weapon himself. His partner, Maggie Friedman, was there.
And David and I left the house early in the morning with our 2 dogs to go running in David's bakkie. And we returned to the house at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And David was driving. He parked the car in our street in front of our house. And he got out of the car to go around to the back to let the dogs out of the car. And I was getting out more slowly on the passenger side. And I was aware of a car coming down the street. And then I heard what I thought was a car backfiring, and it accelerated down the street. And it only was afterwards I realized something was wrong when I saw that David was staggering and he was holding his chest in the front. And he said to me, "I've been shot by a shotgun. Get an ambulance." So David obviously saw his killers. He saw the weapon that killed him.
Parcel bombs have often been used by the security police in their war against the ANC, especially by their foreign division at Daisy, commanded in the 1980s by former Steve Biko interrogator Colonel Piet Goosen and super spy Major Craig Williamson. Williamson has admitted that he was responsible for 2 parcel bombs that killed 2 women and a 6-year-old child. The security police wanted to kill ANC activist Marius Skoon. They sent a parcel bomb to his home in Angola. He wasn't at home when the parcel arrived, and his wife Jeanette opened it. It killed her and their daughter, Katrine. Williamson also admits killing leading ANC theoretician Ruth First, wife of Communist Party leader and later cabinet minister Joe Slovo. First was blown up in the Mozambican capital of Maputo in August 1982. Mozambique was an important hunting ground for South African death squads. This country nearly lost one of its most celebrated sons when a CCB unit, commanded by this man, Pieter Boertes, decided to kill academic Albie Sachs, today a constitutional court judge. Maputo, 7 April 1988. In a moment of darkness, Sachs loses his arm, but he survives. Although Boertes has admitted complicity in the attack which was planned in this country, he has never been charged.
On Saturday night, a bomb exploded in the house of an Anglican priest and anti-apartheid activist, Father Michael Lapsley. He was seriously injured. The house was extensively damaged, the ceiling blown off and property destroyed.
I came upon this manila envelope that had been among the accumulated mail. I opened it and it was addressed to me, and inside were 2 religious magazines, and the magazines were wrapped in plastic, sealed in plastic. So I ripped open the plastic. I took out the magazines, both religious, one in Afrikaans, one in English. I put aside the Afrikaans one. My Afrikaans is not very good. And I opened the English magazine, and the act of opening the magazine was the detonating device for a bomb. I can still remember what happened. The actual explosion, it's still something with me. I remember pain of a scale that I didn't think a human being could ever experience. I remember going into darkness, being thrown backwards by the force of the bomb. The exact angle saved my life that I opened it. I opened it on a small coffee table. If I'd opened it in something like this, a table like this, it would have killed me because it would have knocked out the heart or knocked off the head.
Appearing before the Truth Commission, the leaders of the last apartheid government strenuously denied ever sanctioning murder, torture or kidnapping.
I want to make it clear from the outset that within my knowledge and experience, they never included the authorization of assassination, murder, torture, rape, assault, or the like. I have never been part of any decision taken by Cabinet, the State Security Council, or any committee authorizing or instructing the commission of such gross violations of human rights. Nor did I individually, directly or indirectly ever suggest, order or authorize any such action.
When the former state president made his submission, he said, actions of an unlawful nature were never authorized. They were either bona fide misinterpretations of lawful instructions, or they were bona fide actions as a result of people who were overzealous, or they were mala fide. But those people, you, didn't mention you in particular, but you and your subordinates were bad apples, and that was never authorized. Can you comment on that perspective, please?
Voorzitter.
Mr. Chairman, I've already testified before the Amnesty Committee and before the investigative team, and I've confirmed that certain instructions were given with the approval of the Minister. I do not doubt that at all. He would have informed the State Security Council.
I did not, sir, give any policeman any illegal instruction, unlawful instruction, kill a person, assault a person, or do anything of that nature. As a matter of fact, the Vice Chairman has spoken about people in incarceration. We had extensive instructions published in force orders about how these people should be dealt with, sir. Not anything illegal contained in that, sir. How they should be treated. If a policeman stepped outside that, he must explain that, sir. He must explain his actions.
What I think we find difficult to understand is how this could take place how people could die, could be tortured, could be abducted, could be buried, and many of them, and people like yourself and others just didn't know.
I'd like you to ask my superiors and my political superiors and the political leaders of the country at the time who knew what I and others were doing.
Did they know?
Of course they knew. When you carry out operations and you are congratulated, decorated, honored, and given all the accolades of a successful officer in the struggle against communism and insurgency and counter-revolution, you believe that the people who are honoring you know what you did to be honored for.
During the 1980s, the apartheid government also took its fight against the ANC outside the borders of the country. ANC personnel in buildings in Botswana, Mozambique, Swaziland and Lesotho were attacked several times. On some occasions, the targets were missed completely and citizens of those countries were the ones to suffer.
2 days after Phoenix's first birthday, the family were at home together, obviously preparing for Christmas in a week's time because the present Jackie was making for Phoenix was at the sewing machine. In the middle of the night, under cover of darkness, disguised, camouflaged men with silencers on their guns burst into Jackie's home and murdered her, an unarmed, defenseless woman in the supposed sanctuary of her home. They murdered Joe too, who survived long enough to drag himself to the neighbors and tell them what had happened. They left 12-month-old Phoenix traumatized and alone with her dead mother, in their home spattered with blood all over the place. It was disgusting, brutal, deceitful, treacherous, cold-blooded murder.
The last president of a white government in South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, was asked to appear before the Truth Commission a second time to answer specific questions. But de Klerk, the president who led white South Africans into talks with the black majority, which led to the democratic elections of 1994, also apologized for apartheid on behalf of the National Party and its governments.
Apartheid was wrong. I apologize in my capacity as leader of the National Party to the millions of South Africans who suffered the wrenching disruption of forced removals in respect of their homes, businesses and land, who over the years suffered the shame of being arrested for past law offenses, who over the decades and indeed centuries suffered the indignities and humiliation of racial discrimination, who for a long time were prevented from exercising their full democratic rights in the land of their birth, who were unable to achieve their full potential because of job reservation, and who in any other way suffered as a result of discriminatory legislation and policies. Let me state clearly that the National Party and I accept full responsibility for all our policies, decisions and actions. We stand by our security forces who implemented such policies and decisions and all reasonable interpretations thereof. It has never been the policy of the government, the National Party, that people should be murdered, should be assassinated. I've said that clearly. Such an instruction is in conflict with the policy as it has been at all times within my knowledge. I would firstly like to emphasize on this question, as with the others, that obviously that is absolutely unacceptable. It falls outside the parameters of anything which was ever authorized or intended by government policy, government decisions, or any reasonable interpretation. Whoever authorized that was guilty of a very gruesome and totally unacceptable decision. It was wrong, it wasn't part of the policy, and whoever authorized it was mala fide and was acting against the interest of South Africa.
To make that apology and then to negate it by, I mean, the way that I feel sorry for him, that, I mean, maybe he didn't know. But he didn't know. I told him, and people were killed. We went and told them. I mean, to tell me that he didn't know. I'm sad. I'm sad because I had hoped that maybe he didn't know. No, maybe he didn't know.